Welcome into this Wednesday edition of Palmetto Sports Daily. I'm here in Myrtle Beach. Teagan Brown joined alongside Kevin, who, as you can see, is clearly in a car at the moment and not in his usual spot in studio. And then also, well, usually he's in Charleston. I'm not entirely sure where you are right now, Kevin, but we've got Carmine in Greenville, too. And it looks like Kevin is a little bit frozen, but that's okay. Hopefully we get him back. Anyways, we're talking some baseball to start our show because Coastal Carolina baseball hit the road to Clemson last night for their midweek battle, and Coastal looked like they were struggling early in this one. They were down 9-3 at the end of the sixth inning, and then throughout the seventh, eighth, and ninth, they scored 5 runs, then 2 runs, and then one more to mount a huge comeback in this one against the Tigers. Now, this week, the Tigers dropped out of those top 25 rankings after being swept by Notre Dame, and then Coastal Carolina went up to number 15 after sweeping JMU over the weekend and run ruling them in all 3 games. Now, Carmine, I know you guys were at this game in the upstate, and I'm sure you were feeling a little bit of confidence there in the Tigers after their struggle over the weekend, but something just clearly went wrong for them defense-wise in those last 3 innings. Just tell us about what you saw.
Yeah, Teagan. Well, I had my script basically written when the Tigers were up 9-3. You know, as you know, Coastal went up 3-0, so it really looked like it was going to be a Clemson comeback. They scored 9 unanswered runs. They scored 5 runs in just the 4th inning to give Clemson the lead. Jacob Jarrell hit his team-leading 11th home run of the season, and then Ty Daly continued the rally. Division I's active leader in career home runs, hit one 405 feet on top of the Tiger Paw in right center field. His 60th career home run, and Clemson took that 9-3 lead. But then after Clemson scored 9 unanswered runs, my script was totally written. Coastal came back, scoring 8 unanswered runs in the last 3 innings, letting in 2 of those runs when an ump could not move his rump, and he got in the way of the Clemson play. The Tigers lost that lead for good in the 8th inning on one of 2 errors from Anderson native, local here to the upstate, T.L. Hanna graduate Jay Dillard. Unfortunate there for him at second base. He had a tough time, and Clemson went from having a 6-run lead to losing by 2, and went from gaining momentum from a midweek top 15 win to losing their 4th game in a row. Afterwards, here's the coach, Eric Bakich, of a heartbreaking loss.
We didn't lose because the umpire interference or a bad hop or anything like that. We lost because we got out-competed in the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and that's ultimately on me. That's my fault. Should have found a way to make sure that we kept the pedal down, and they outscored us 8-0 in the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and that's not acceptable. That's not okay. I know we all know that we're not playing fundamental defense right now, and we are going to work on that. Everybody's disappointed. We deserve any criticism we get. The fingers should be pointed at myself, and we'll get it turned around.
So I love the accountability that Coach Eric Bakich was taking there, and now the Tigers, like I said, go from turning the tide from getting swept by Notre Dame to continuing a 4-game losing streak now. And it was also an error in the 9th inning in the 2nd game of the Notre Dame series that allowed Notre Dame to take a 1-run lead in the last inning over Clemson. So these defensive fielding errors, uncommon. We saw this in the last loss of last season in the regional round when Clemson committed 7 errors, got blown out by Kentucky in their final game, ending their season of the NCAA regional. And now, Kevin, the Tigers are going to try to stop their streak of 1-5 record-wise in the ACC, hosting Miami on Thursday. Your thoughts on the Tigers in this tough stretch?
Yeah, you see that 1-5 mark in the ACC, like you just mentioned, and it's shocking at this point, especially the way this team started off. I don't know if I'm more impressed by what Coastal did last night, or if I'm more disappointed in the way Clemson gave this game away. Coastal, it seems like you just keep taking things away from this team. They lose starting pitchers, they lose hitters to excessive injuries. These guys are going to be out, multiple weeks at this point, and still they're coming up with big wins on the road, beating ACC teams. That's a huge deal for Kevin Schnall and his team. On the other hand, you look at Clemson, and I'm incredibly disappointed. We talked about the 1-5 record in the ACC to get things started off after what was a really good start to the season. And then, they came in here to Charleston last week. They got a victory over the College of Charleston, got a win over the Citadel. You thought maybe they were going to turn things around after a rough start in ACC play. And they just go down the tubes against Notre Dame last weekend, and it continues last night against Coastal. So I'm worried about Clemson at this point, and just really impressed with how Coastal's been playing.
Yeah, I think Coastal Carolina, despite, the injuries that they've had, like you mentioned, Kevin, they've really been able to step up. We had reports yesterday, Trace Mason, he'll be out for 4 to 6 weeks, one of the team's top hitters with a broken hand, so now they lose that piece of their team. As for returns from injuries, there were also reports yesterday from Kendall Rogers at D1 Baseball that Cam Fluke could be making a return in Week 11 after injuries that plagued him at the beginning of the season, but, it's all up in the air, so definitely impressive what Coastal Carolina has been able to do with what they've got. But Carmine, just what do you think the issue is for Clemson here after how they started the season and how high they were in the rankings to jump down out of the rankings where they are now and just the struggles that they've had? What's the problem there?
Yeah, I think just keeping that momentum rolling in this game as far as the hitting, and then untimely fielding errors like we've seen in the last Notre Dame series and in this one against Coastal in that loss. And for example, the very tough time for the Tigers hitting with runners in scoring position. In their last loss of the Notre Dame series, they were just 1 for 14 with runners in scoring position. They had 13 hits, but they were all singles. So I think it's just breaking out of that bad luck, keeping the belief going like Coastal has to come back from anything. And I'm pretty sure the Tigers will turn things around under Eric Bakich. But speaking about Coach Bakich, he was asked yesterday after that devastating loss, losing that 6-run lead, about Paul Maneri, the former Gamecocks coach, of course, who parted ways with USC on Saturday after getting mercy ruled 22-6 against Arkansas in Game 1 of that series. Here you see the final game that Paul Maneri will coach against Clemson in that great rivalry. He'll be shaking hands with Eric Bakich here. And Coach Bakich, just pure class, speaking about the legacy and impact that Coach Maneri has left on college baseball in his 40 years at multiple different schools as a college baseball head coach.
I'm a big fan of Paul Maneri. I texted him and just thanked him for a lifetime of he was an inspiration to a lot of young coaches like myself, Cliff Godwin, others, and we were coming up, and he's, even when I was here as a volunteer in 2002, we go to Omaha, and Notre Dame's in Omaha, and they got this 5'8" center fielder, Steve Stanley, and they just got this tough team, and they had just, if you remember back then, we had got swept at home by Florida State, and we needed to win that series to be ACC champs, and Florida State wins it here on this field, and then Notre Dame goes to Tallahassee and wins a super regional to get to Omaha. It was just so impressive, and he's a Hall of Famer. He's had a legendary career, national championship at LSU, obviously, but he's won everywhere, and so I wish him all the best in retirement, and big fan of Monty Lee as well, and know he'll do a great job in the interim and hopefully longer. So, but that, hadn't really, I texted Coach Maneri, hate to see that, but he is certainly deserves every accolade of the Hall of Fame career that he's had.
So pure class there by Eric Bakich after such a tough loss, to be so complimentary of not only Paul Maneri, but the former Clemson head coach for 7 seasons, Monty Lee, who's now the interim Gamecocks head coach. So we'll see if that turns into a full-time position or how that shakes out with the next full-time Gamecocks baseball head coach. But let's talk a little basketball. Of course, it is March Madness time. UNC parting ways with their basketball head coach for the men, Hubert Davis after 5 seasons, and here's how he did in those 5 seasons. Made the national final in his first season as UNC head coach, and we remember that they lost to Kansas in that championship game, then missing the NCAA tournament entirely. The next year, Sweet 16. The next year was losing in the first round of the tournament after, you guys will recall, controversially, UNC made the first 4, won that game to get into the tournament, but their record was, if they didn't have those 3 letters, they probably wouldn't have even gotten into that first 4 game in the NCAA tournament last season. And then this season, right here in Greenville, Kevin, losing in crazy fashion, losing a 19-point lead to VCU here at the Bon Secours Wellness Arena in Greenville, getting upset in the first round of the tournament. After they did have a very nice regular season, they lost Caleb Wilson, their first-round draft pick, one-and-done freshman, so that has to be taken into account. They were undefeated at home, 18-0 in Chapel Hill in the Dean Dome. But, Kevin, your thoughts on Hubert Davis and UNC parting ways?
Not entirely surprising. When you're a program like North Carolina, even getting to the tournament isn't the goal. The goal is to get to the Final Four. The goal is to win national championships. So the fact that he's come up short over these last couple of years of doing that, it's not surprising that he pulled the trigger. The thing I'm interested in is who's next over at North Carolina. And it sounds like, I think it was John Rothstein of CBS Sports said this morning that for the first time, it seems like North Carolina is going to go outside of that Tar Heel family tree, outside of Dean Smith and his coaching tree and some of the former players he had, and look towards their next head coach. A name that really caught my eye when I was looking at the odds of who's going to be the next coach is Mark Byington. And he's a guy we've talked about here before, former College of Charleston, longtime assistant under Bobby Cremins. He took over as the interim head coach at CFC when Cremins retired midseason. Then he would go on to be the head coach at Georgia Southern, James Madison. Right now he's doing an amazing job over at Vanderbilt. Got them to the second round again this season. I think his odds were 10-1. They actually opened at about 4-1. He was the second favorite when the odds first opened over the weekend when the word got out that Hubert was going to be fired. He's dropped down to 10-1 now. I think you're going to start seeing some of the bigger names pop up of guys that they're going to be interested in. I know Brad Stevens, who's the former Butler coach, former Boston Celtics coach, and now he's the president of operations for the Celtics. He came out this morning already and said that he's not interested in the job, even though I know the Tar Heel fans were pushing for him a whole lot as well. So it's not going to be Brad Stevens, but I'm really interested in who's next up in Chapel Hill. We're just getting going here on Palmetto Sports Daily. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. I've made it out of the car, back in my office right now as we're getting ready for a busy day here in the Low Country. We're going to talk some college football right now. South Carolina in the middle of sorry, I'm getting some static here. South Carolina in the middle of spring practice right now. Shane Beamer talked to the media a little bit yesterday. One of the subjects that came up was starting quarterback Lenore Sellers and what he's expecting from Sellers coming in to his final season as the starter for South Carolina. One of the things that really caught a lot of people's eye was that Beamer says he's expecting Sellers to be, I think, more of a leader this coming season. And it's kind of curious, as we were talking about during the break, Carmine, you would think the guy who has been the starting quarterback for the last couple of years would have already been the leader of this team.
Yeah, no kidding. I was thinking he should have already been the leader, and this is a little late by Shane Beamer to come out saying Lenoris is now supposed to take the reins. What happened in the first 2 years that he was quarterback? I mean, we're talking Heisman last year leading into this. Disappointing season last year after a great season taking over for the first time a couple seasons ago. And I'm wondering about the late notice or the late notice on this leadership.
Knowing where to go with the ball on time when you're learning a new offense, certainly learning the offense, but then not just knowing the offense, but it's just so ingrained where you know where to go and you're getting the ball out of your hands. Y'all have heard me say it before. He's had some, phenomenal highlight type plays where he's scrambling or he gets hit, and some of those that he turns into a big play. He'll be the first to tell you some of those were, protection issues, but some of those are probably him hanging onto the ball too long too and not going where he needs to be, but it turns into a great play. So don't want to take that creativity away from him, don't get me wrong, but getting the ball out of his hands, knowing where to go with it. And then really for me, not to get too I don't want to get too technical from a quarterback standpoint. For me, it's just the leadership, whether he likes it or not. He's a two-time captain, voted on by his teammates. 2024, he was voted a captain. 2025, he was voted a captain. So with that comes responsibility to whom, what is much is expected, much is required, and him being the leader that we need to be. That it may not always be your personality to be vocal and challenge people, but everybody's looking to you as the quarterback, as a two-time captain, and those leadership skills. That doesn't mean you have to be all of a sudden just screaming and yelling rah rah gob, but continuing to be the person you are and take an even bigger step from a leadership standpoint. And those are the things that I want to see, and I've really been impressed with him so far, John, in regards to those things.
I guess after hearing Beamer speak, I'm just kind of curious what LaNorris has done leadership-wise in the past 2 years, because like you guys said, he should have technically been a leader on this team already, and like Beamer said, he was voted a captain twice, so in my mind it seems that he would have already kind of stepped into that leadership role already, and he would have done that a couple of years ago, but I don't know, maybe he just hasn't been the type of leader that Beamer was expecting. I've never met LaNorris Sellers. I've covered him a whole bunch. Obviously, he's a South Florence alum, and he seems a little bit quieter in press conferences, so I'm just kind of curious what his personality is, with his teammates and how much he steps up that way. But if that's what Beamer wants to see this year, hopefully he does that, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, whatever LaNorris has been doing for the last couple of years, obviously it's been working to an extent, but Beamer wants more. Part of that could just be he is older now. He's a veteran. He's been there for 4 years. And, it might not be that LaNorris hasn't been doing it the last couple of years. It might just be that Beamer is now expecting more out of him because he's a veteran and because he's been a guy who's been starting the last 2 years. So, I'm willing to give LaNorris the benefit of the doubt going into this one. I'm sure, if he hadn't been a leader, I'm sure we would have heard more of that in the past couple of seasons, Carmine.
Yeah, and it's a great vote of confidence that his teammates literally voted for him to be captain 2 years in a row. So I think it's just taking that next additional step, like Beamer said, not that he hasn't been leading, but just to even lean more into that leadership role, Teagan. And plus, a lot of guys on Coastal are going to have to step up for the football season as well.
Yeah, there will be a lot of opportunities for people to do that. It's almost an entirely new roster this year. Of course, brand new first-year head coach Ryan Beard taking over. He brought a lot of his staff over from Missouri State, brought a good number of players over from Missouri State as well. There are a couple of guys here at Coastal who are left over from the Tim Beck era, including the guy you were just looking at there, Robbie Washington, who's kind of already stepped into that leadership role, both, in practice and in real life around his players, but also on social media. He was the guy who during the recruiting season was out there constantly on Twitter just talking to recruits and talking to fans and hyping up Coastal and this new era with Ryan Beard. So there's definitely a lot of excitement around the program. Also happening this week for them, they're hosting a spring game, and it's going to look like a real spring game is the goal, whereas last year they did a spring showcase. The year before that, they didn't do anything. So we got to talk with Ryan Beard about what fans can expect at the spring game on Friday.
So Friday, you'll see we're going to go good on good. We have had a few nagging injuries on the O-line, so we can't totally separate the teams, but we're going to go ones versus ones, twos versus twos, hopefully get the threes out there, get everybody reps. We're going to try to get around 70 snaps probably, 70, 80 snaps, and then go from there. That's the goal, that's the target. And then special teams will not be live. So we'll kick the ball off on air, set it, place it, get going, and see who can compete.
Fans will see a good amount of players this week, and they should see equal snaps from each of the quarterbacks as well, each of whom brand new this year to the roster. We got to take a quick break here on Palmetto Sports Daily. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily, and we talked some college football. Let's talk some pro football, because the Carolina Panthers trading away backup quarterback and NFL veteran for about 15 years, Andy Dalton, to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for a 2027 7th-round pick. Big Red leaving Charlotte, and just seems like a guy with a great personality, great team guy. Of course, quarterback lessons to Bryce Young as his backup for all 3 of his seasons. That's where I feel his impact will be most felt, is not necessarily filling in, because we saw last year in the time he filled in that Buffalo Bills lost 40-9. Looked like he had lost a step. So I think the biggest impact will be losing Bryce Young's mentor at the quarterback position, but we'll see how that all plays out next season. We'll be right back with another Charlotte team, the Hornets' red hot streak, right after this. Well, it's our 4th and final segment of the show, so we're going to talk about the number 4, the Charlotte Hornets, on a 4-game winning streak, and they won by 44 points last night over the Sacramento Kings. Kobe White scoring 27 points for the second time in 3 games. The Hornets have won 12 out of their last 15. They're looking great, just outside of the actual top 6 in the East to make the playoffs. Kevin, your thoughts? Will they get into that spot by the end of the season?
Yeah, I think that right now they're probably one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the NBA with the way they've been playing the last 6 or 7 weeks. So I fully expect them to move out of the play-in round and just get up to that 6th seed. And I think they're going to be a team nobody really wants to play, especially early on in the East, Teagan.
Yeah, totally agree. I think they're going to be a tough team to beat as we get further into the season. We've got to wrap it up here today on Palmetto Sports Daily. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you back here tomorrow.